My dear friends, tonight we embark on a deeper journey together, immersing ourselves in the heart of a sacred story from God's Word. We journey back in time to a vast and silent wilderness, where the air is crisp and the stars seem close enough to touch. We are about to witness a miracle of gentle provision, a story of divine care whispered on the desert wind, Manna Mornings, the quiet rhythm of gathering dessert bread at dawn. Imagine, for a prolonged moment, walking those ancient paths alongside these figures of faith, feeling the dust beneath your feet, the sun on your skin, and witnessing these pivotal events unfold, events that have shaped generations, teaching us about reliance, about sustenance, and about the quiet, everyday miracles that God provides. This story reminds us that even in our own wildernesses, in times of uncertainty and need, God's loving hand is always there, offering nourishment for our bodies and our souls. So, before we delve deeper into this expansive narrative, if these stories from Scripture resonate with your spirit and bring you comfort, I warmly invite you to like this reflection and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps share these messages of hope, faith, and peace with others. We also invite you to share, if they feel comfortable, a brief prayer intention, a favorite Bible verse related to the topic, or a place they are listening from, fostering a sense of spiritual community on this extended journey. Now, let the cares of the day gently fade away. Find your quiet space, perhaps say a silent prayer, breathe deeply, and let us open our hearts and minds to the wisdom, comfort, and unfolding wonder of God's Word in this ancient narrative. You find yourself now not in the comfort of your present surroundings, but transported, carried on the gentle breath of imagination to the wilderness of sin. It is a stark and breathtaking landscape, unfolding between Elim and Sinai. The sun, a fiery orb, has just dipped below the jagged horizon, painting the western sky in hues of fiery orange, deep violet, and soft rose. A profound stillness settles over the vast expanse of sand and rock, broken only by the whisper of the evening breeze as it snakes through the sparse, thorny acacia trees and rustles the dry leaves of desert shrubs. You are part of a great multitude, the children of Israel, recently freed from the long, bitter years of slavery in Egypt. The memory of the parting of the Red Sea, that astonishing display of God's power, is still vivid in your mind's eye, a beacon of hope and a testament to the might of the one who leads you. Yet, freedom, you are learning, comes with its own set of challenges. The initial euphoria of liberation has begun to fade, replaced by the harsh realities of desert life. The camp is a sprawling city of tents, pitched in a sprawling, perhaps somewhat disorganized fashion, a testament to the suddenness of your departure and the weariness of your journey. Families huddle together, the flickering lights of small fires casting dancing shadows on the tent cloths. You can hear the low murmur of voices, a mixture of Hebrew dialects, the tired cries of children, and the occasional bleating of sheep or goats, the remnants of livestock brought out of Egypt. The air is cool now, a welcome respite from the scorching heat of the day. You pull your cloak tighter around you, the rough fabric of familiar comfort. Look around you. See the faces of your fellow travelers. Some are etched with worry, their eyes scanning the darkening landscape with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Others wear expressions of stoic resignation, their faith, perhaps, worn thin by the relentless hardships. And then there are the children, some sleeping soundly in their mother's arms, others playing quiet games in the dust, their innocent laughter a poignant reminder of the life that continues, even in the midst of desolation. It has been a month and a half since you left Egypt, a journey that has tested your endurance to its limits. The initial supplies you carried are dwindling, or perhaps, for many, already gone. The oasis of Elim, with its 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, is now a cherished memory, a fleeting moment of respite in this arduous trek. Now, hunger gnaws at your belly, a persistent, aching emptiness that clouds your thoughts and shortens your temper. You hear the discontent rippling through the camp like a restless wind. The murmuring started softly at first, whispers of doubt and fear exchanged in the privacy of tents. But now it has grown louder, more insistent, a collective groan of a people pushed to the brink. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt, you hear someone lament, their voice raw with despair. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." The words hang heavy in the air, a bitter accusation directed at Moses and Aaron, the leaders appointed by God. You feel a pang of sympathy for them. These men burdened with the immense responsibility of guiding a weary and frightened people. You see Moses, his face etched with the strain of leadership, his eyes reflecting a deep sorrow. Aaron, his brother, stands beside him, his expression equally troubled. They are not immune to the people's suffering. Indeed, they feel it deeply. You remember Moses' initial reluctance to take on this role, his humility before God. And yet, here he is, standing in the gap, bearing the weight of a nation's anxieties. How heavy that burden must feel, you ponder. How challenging to lead when fear and hunger are the loudest voices in the camp. It is a profound reminder, perhaps, of the burdens that leaders, even spiritual ones, often carry in silence, their own hearts aching while they strive to offer comfort and guidance to others. The darkness deepens, and the stars begin to emerge, scattered like brilliant diamonds across the velvet canvas of the night sky. They are so clear, so bright in this unpolluted desert air. You look up, and for a moment, the vastness of the cosmos seems to dwarf your earthly troubles. There's a sense of awe, a feeling of being incredibly small in the face of such grandeur. And yet, you also remember the promises of God, the covenant made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You are his chosen people, led by his hand. Surely he has not brought you this far only to abandon you. This thought, a fragile spark of hope, flickers within you. As the night wears on, a hush falls over the camp, the fires die down to glowing embers, and most of the people have retreated into their tents, seeking what little rest they can find. But sleep is elusive for many. The gnawing hunger, the uncertainty of tomorrow, the vast, silent desert pressing in from all sides, these are not conducive to peaceful slumber. You, too, find yourself restless, your mind replaying the events of the day. The sounds of discontent, the worried faces. You wonder what tomorrow will bring. Will there be food? Will God hear the cries of his people, even their grumbling cries? Or is this desert to be your grave, as some fear? The desert is a place of extremes, you realize. Extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme beauty, and extreme desolation. It is also, you are beginning to understand, a place of extreme testing. A crucible where faith is either forged in fire or crumbles into dust. Then a message comes. Moses and Aaron have gathered the elders, and word spreads through the camp. God has spoken. You feel a stir of anticipation, a mixture of hope and trepidation. What will the message be? A rebuke for your lack of faith, a promise of deliverance, or something else entirely? You strain your ears, trying to catch the words as they are relayed from tent to tent. The message is one of both admonition and astonishing grace. God has heard the grumbling of the Israelites. He is aware of their suffering, their hunger, and he is going to act, not in anger, but in compassion. In the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. The message declares, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we, that you should grumble against us? Moses' words, conveying God's message, carry a tone of both gentle reproof and profound reassurance. It is a reminder that their complaints, while directed at human leaders, are ultimately against God himself. Yet, even in this, God's response is not punitive but provident. The promise is astounding. I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. Bread from heaven. You can scarcely believe your ears. Bread, in this barren wilderness where nothing grows. It sounds like a dream, a mirage. And then, another promise. At twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. Meat and bread. A feast in the desert. Is it possible your heart, so recently heavy with despair, begins to feel a flicker of hope, a cautious optimism? You ponder the nature of this God, a God who hears even the faithless cries of his people, a God who responds to grumbling with grace. It's a mystery, this divine love, so patient, so long-suffering. Theologians through the ages have marveled at the layers of meaning in this divine promise, seeing in it not just physical sustenance, but a deeper spiritual nourishment. a foreshadowing of God's ultimate provision for humanity. As evening approaches, a palpable sense of anticipation fills the camp. People emerge from their tents, their faces turned towards the sky, their eyes searching. The sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the sand. And then it happens. A sound, like the rushing of a mighty wind, fills the air. You look up and see a vast flock of birds, quail, flying low over the camp. They are so numerous, they seem to cover the sky. And then, as if by an unseen hand, they begin to descend, settling in and around the camp, covering the ground. It is an incredible sight, a miracle unfolding before your very eyes. The people, initially stunned into silence, soon erupt in cries of astonishment and joy. They rush out, gathering the quail, enough to feed every family. The smell of roasting meat soon fills the air, a rich, savory aroma that makes your mouth water. For the first time in what seems like an eternity, you eat your fill. The meat is tender, flavorful, a gift from heaven. Gratitude wells up within you, a warm, comforting feeling that soothes your weary soul. You look around at the faces of your fellow Israelites, illuminated by the flickering fires. There's laughter, relief, and a renewed sense of wonder. For tonight, at least, the hunger is banished. God has kept His promise. You reflect on this moment, this sudden, abundant provision. How often in your own life has God provided in unexpected ways, perhaps not with a flock of quail, but with a timely solution, a helping hand, a word of encouragement? These moments of divine intervention, big or small, are invitations to trust, to recognize His presence in your daily life. The quail are a sign, a tangible proof of God's care. But the promise of bread from heaven still hangs in the air, a mystery yet to be unveiled. What will it be like? How will it come? These questions linger in your mind as you prepare for sleep, your stomach full, your heart a little lighter. The desert night, once so menacing, now seems to hold a sense of hushed expectation. You drift off to sleep, the image of the quail still fresh in your mind, the taste of the unexpected feast still lingering. The desert around you is quiet. The camp is still. The stars, those silent witnesses, continue their ancient vigil, and as you sleep, you are unaware of the even greater wonder that awaits you with the dawn. A new kind underscore of sustenance, a daily reminder of God's intimate involvement in your life, is about to be revealed. The story of the manna is just beginning to unfold, a story of quiet rhythm, of daily dependence, and of the sustaining grace of God in the most desolate of places. The first light of dawn begins to paint the eastern sky with soft strokes of pink and gold. A gentle coolness hangs in the air, carrying the faint, earthy scent of the desert. You awaken slowly, the memory of last night's miraculous provision of quail still vivid in your mind. A sense of quiet anticipation stirs within you. God promised bread from heaven in the morning. What form will it take? How will it appear? You rise from your sleeping mat, your movements hushed, and step out of your tent. The camp is beginning to stir. Others, too, are emerging, their faces turned eastward, their eyes scanning the ground, the sky. A profound stillness envelops the scene, a stillness pregnant with expectation. And then you see it. As the dew that had settled on the ground during the night begins to evaporate with the first rays of the rising sun, a thin, flaky substance remains. It covers the surface of the desert like a delicate frost, small and round, like coriander seed, and white. You stoop down, your heart pounding with a mixture of awe and curiosity. You reach out a tentative hand and touch it. It is cool, slightly moist, and fragile. You pick up a small piece and examine it closely. It is unlike anything you have ever seen before. The people around you are equally mystified. Man who? They ask one another in Hebrew. What is it? The question echoes through the camp, a chorus of bewildered voices. The very name by which this mysterious food will be known, manna, is born from this moment of collective wonder and uncertainty. Moses steps forward, his voice calm and steady amidst the rising murmur of questions. It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat, he proclaims. His words confirm the miracle. This delicate, ethereal substance, appearing as if from nowhere, is God's answer to your hunger. It is the bread from heaven. A wave of relief and gratitude washes over you. You look at the vast expanse of the desert, now shimmering with this mysterious white layer. And you are overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of God's provision. Enough for everyone. Enough for this entire nation, wandering in the wilderness. Moses then conveys God's instructions for gathering the manna. Each one of you is to gather as much as you need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. An omer, you learn, is a measure roughly equivalent to about 2 quarts or 2 liters. It is a specific amount, a reminder that this provision is not to be hoarded, but received with daily trust. There are further instructions, crucial ones. You are to gather it each morning, for when the sun grows hot, it will melt away, and you are not to keep any of it until the next morning. This last instruction seems puzzling to some. Why not save some, just in case? The habit of storing up, born from years of uncertainty, is hard to break. You watch as families begin to gather the manna. Children, their eyes wide with wonder, help their parents, carefully scooping the delicate flakes into baskets and pots. There is a quiet, almost reverent atmosphere as people go about this task. It is not a frantic scramble, but a gentle, rhythmic activity. The morning air is fresh, the light soft. It is a scene of profound simplicity and profound miracle. You join in, gathering your omer, enough for yourself and your family. The manna feels light in your hands, almost like snowflakes. You wonder about its taste. The scriptures will later describe it as like wafers made with honey, or like fresh oil, a subtly sweet and nourishing taste. As you gather, you reflect on the nature of this gift. It is given freely, abundantly, yet with specific conditions. It requires daily effort, a willingness to rise early and gather. It demands trust, a belief that there will be enough for today, and that more will come tomorrow. It teaches a rhythm of dependence, a daily turning to God for sustenance. This is not just food for the body, you realize. It is a spiritual lesson, a training in faith and obedience. The quiet rhythm of gathering this dessert bread at dawn is an invitation into a deeper relationship with the provider himself. You see some people, perhaps driven by old anxieties or a lack of trust, trying to gather more than an omer per person, or attempting to save some for the next day. Despite Moses' clear instructions, you wonder what will happen. Will their disobedience have consequences? The story will unfold, and these tests of obedience will indeed reveal the human heart's struggles with trust and surrender. How God's grace operates in such moments of human failing and divine testing is a sacred mystery that continues to inspire awe and humble reflection. For now, however, there is a sense of quiet joy, of shared wonder. You return to your tent with your portion of manna. You prepare it as instructed, perhaps grinding it or baking it into small cakes, and then you eat. The taste is delicate, sweet, and satisfying. It is indeed bread from heaven, a tangible expression of God's love and care. As you eat, you feel a sense of peace settle over you. The gnawing hunger is gone, replaced by a gentle sense of well-being. You look at your family, their faces reflecting a similar contentment. In this simple act of eating, you are partaking in a miracle, a daily communion with the divine. The sun climbs higher in the sky, its rays growing stronger, and just as Moses said, any manna left ungathered on the ground melts away, disappearing as mysteriously as it came. It is a powerful reminder of the need for timely obedience, and of the transient nature of this earthly provision. It cannot be hoarded. It cannot be taken for granted. It must be received each day, fresh from God's hand. This first manna morning sets the pattern for the days, weeks, months, and even years to come. It is the beginning of a long journey of learning to live by faith, to trust in God's daily provision, to walk in obedience to His commands. The quiet rhythm of gathering dessert bread at dawn will become a central part of your life in the wilderness, a constant reminder of God's faithfulness in the midst of scarcity. The implications of this divine feeding are immense, stretching far beyond the immediate physical need. It's a lesson etched not just in the sands of the desert, but in the hearts of the people. A lesson that will be recounted for generations. You are a witness to the beginning of this incredible chapter in the story of God's people, a story of manna mornings and the quiet rhythm of grace. The journey is far from over. The challenges will continue, but for this moment, you are filled, sustained, and deeply aware of the presence of a loving, providing God. The desert, once a place of fear and despair, is now, in this early morning light, a place of wonder and divine encounter. The sun continues its ascent, and the desert landscape, now cleared of its pearly white covering, shimmers under the growing heat. The camp is alive with a new kind of energy. The desperate hunger of yesterday has been replaced by a quiet satisfaction, the anxious murmuring by a hushed awe. You watch as people go about their morning chores, their conversations softer, their movements less frantic. There is a sense of shared experience, of having witnessed something truly extraordinary together. This communal aspect of the miracle is significant, you reflect. God's provision is not just for individuals in isolation, but for the entire community, binding you together in shared dependence and shared gratitude. You think about the name given to this miraculous food, manna. What is it? It perfectly captures the human response to God's unfathomable works. It's a question born of surprise, of inability to categorize or explain, and perhaps, in that very question, lies a profound truth. God's ways are often beyond our comprehension, His gifts more wondrous than we can imagine. The manna is a tangible symbol of this divine mystery, a daily invitation to embrace the unknown with faith rather than fear. It reminds you that true understanding often comes not from intellectual analysis, but from humble acceptance and grateful experience. Moses' role in this event is also striking. He is the intermediary, the one who communicates God's will to the people and interprets God's actions. His leadership is not based on his own wisdom or strength, but on his attentiveness to God's voice. You see him moving through the camp, offering guidance, encouragement, and sometimes gentle reproof. His presence is a steadying force, a reminder that even in the wilderness, there is order, there is purpose, there is divine guidance. It makes you consider the importance of spiritual leadership, of those who help us discern God's presence and purpose in our own lives, especially during times of confusion or hardship. You also ponder the testing aspect of the manna. God said He would test the people to see if they would follow His instructions. This might seem harsh to some, but you begin to understand it in a different light. The test is not designed to make them fail, but to help them grow. It is an opportunity to strengthen their faith, to learn obedience, to cultivate a deeper trust in God's providence. The daily gathering, the precise measure, the prohibition against hoarding, these are all part of that spiritual training. Just as muscles grow stronger with exercise, so faith grows stronger when it is put into practice, when it is stretched beyond its comfort zone. The desert, in this sense, becomes a school of faith, and the manna is one of its most important lessons. You consider the implications of this for your own life. Are there manna moments in your journey? Daily provisions that you might overlook or take for granted? Are there instructions from God that you find challenging to follow? Tests of trust that stretch your faith? This ancient story, you realize, is not just about a historical event. It is a timeless allegory for the human pilgrimage, for our ongoing need for divine sustenance and guidance. It speaks to the universal human experience of navigating wildernesses, both external and internal, and learning to depend on a power greater than ourselves. The day unfolds. People engage in their tasks, tend to their livestock, care for their children. But there is a difference now. The despair that had gripped the camp is lifted. There is a newfound sense of hope, a quiet confidence that God is with them, that He will not abandon them. The manna is more than just food. It is a symbol of God's presence, a tangible sign of His covenant love. Each tiny flake, so delicate and yet so life-sustaining, speaks of a Creator who cares for the smallest details of His creation, who provides for His children with tenderness and precision. As evening approaches, you anticipate the possibility of more quail, as God had provided the previous night, and indeed, as twilight descends, another flock arrives, settling around the camp. Once again, there's enough for everyone, the dual provision quail in the evening. Manna in the morning establishes a rhythm of divine care, a daily cycle of receiving and trusting. It's a powerful demonstration that God is capable of meeting all their needs, both for substantial sustenance like meat and for daily bread. It's a balanced provision, thoughtfully given. Lying down to sleep that night, you feel a profound sense of peace. The desert still stretches around you, vast and formidable, but it no longer seems so menacing. It has become a place of miracles, a place where heaven touches earth. where God walks with His people. You close your eyes, your heart filled with a quiet gratitude, and you listen to the gentle sounds of the sleeping camp. The Manna Mornings have begun, and with them, a new chapter of faith, a deeper understanding of the God who sustains, guides, and loves His people. Even in the midst of the most barren wilderness, the journey ahead is still long and uncertain, but tonight, you rest in the assurance of His unfailing care, ready to greet another dawn, another morning of manna, another opportunity to witness the quiet rhythm of His grace. The silence of the desert night seems to hold a sacred promise, a whisper of hope for all the tomorrows yet to come. The soft, pearlescent light of another desert dawn begins to seep into your tent, gently coaxing you from sleep. A familiar stillness hangs in the air, the same sacred hush that preceded yesterday's miracle. You rise, a sense of quiet anticipation now mingled with a nascent understanding of the rhythm that is, beginning to define your days in this wilderness. You step outside, and there it is again, just as Moses promised, just as God provided. The ground, kissed by the morning dew, is covered with the same delicate, flaky substance, the manna, God's bread from heaven. The sight of it, once a source of bewildered questions, now brings a quiet smile to your lips, a gentle stirring of gratitude in your heart. This is not a what-I'm wonder, you realize, but a sustained daily miracle, a testament to God's unwavering faithfulness. You join the others as they begin the morning's gathering. The initial flurry of excitement and confusion has given way to a more practiced, almost meditative routine. Families move with a quiet purpose, each member contributing to the task of collecting their daily portion. You watch the children, their small hands carefully scooping the manna into little baskets, their faces serious with concentration, yet with an undercurrent of innocent delight. They are growing up with this miracle, you reflect, and for them, perhaps, bread from heaven will be a foundational memory, shaping their understanding of God from their earliest years. What a profound way to learn about divine provision, not from abstract teachings, but from tangible, daily experience. You take your omer, the designated measure for each person in your household, the instruction to gather only enough for the day, no more, no less, resonates deeply this morning. It is a lesson in moderation, in contentment, in trusting that tomorrow's needs will be met with tomorrow's provision. How countercultural this is, you think, even in your ancient world, where the instinct to hoard, to accumulate, to secure oneself against future lack, is so deeply ingrained in the human psyche. The manna teaches a different way, a way of radical dependence on the giver, rather than on the gift itself. It is a daily exercise in letting go of anxiety about the future and embracing the sufficiency of the present moment. Theologians and spiritual writers across centuries would later reflect on this aspect of the manna, seeing it as a powerful metaphor for living in the now, for trusting God's grace one day at a time, a concept so central to many faith traditions. You observe your fellow Israelites. Most are diligently following Moses' instructions, gathering their omers with care. However, you recall that yesterday, some had tried to keep the manna overnight, perhaps out of fear, or skepticism, or simple disobedience. Moses had been clear, no one is to keep any of it until morning. You learn from hushed conversations that those who disobeyed found their hoarded manna spoiled. It bred worms and became foul, a stark and unpleasant consequence of their lack of trust and disobedience. This news ripples through the camp, a sobering reminder of the importance of adhering to God's specific commands. It's not that God is vindictive, you ponder, but that His instructions are given for your well-being, for your spiritual growth. Disobedience, in this context, is not just breaking a rule. It is a refusal of the very trust that the manna is meant to cultivate. It is choosing anxiety over peace, self-reliance over God-reliance. The sun begins its ascent, its golden rays stretching across the desert floor. The heat intensifies, and as it does, the ungathered manna begins to melt, disappearing like morning mist. This daily vanishing act reinforces the urgency of the morning gathering and the preciousness of the gift. It cannot be taken for granted. It requires a conscious, timely effort. You imagine how this daily rhythm must shape the community's life. The entire camp awakens early, united in this common purpose. It fosters a sense of shared responsibility, of collective participation in the miracle. There are no privileged few who receive more. Everyone who gathers receives according to their need. It is a profoundly egalitarian provision, reflecting God's impartial love. As you prepare the manna for your morning meal, perhaps grinding it into flour to make small, sweet cakes, or boiling it into a kind of porridge, you marvel at its versatility. The scriptures mention its taste being like wafers made with honey, or like rich cream. It is nourishing, sustaining, and pleasant. Yet, you can also imagine that, over time, the very consistency of this diet might present its own challenges. For now, however, it is a source of immense gratitude and wonder. You eat with your family, the conversation perhaps softer, more reflective than it used to be in the days of desperate hunger. There is a sense of sacredness in this simple meal, a recognition that you are partaking in something holy, something directly from God's hand. You reflect on the name manna. While it originated from the question, "What is it?" it now signifies sustenance, a daily bread. But the initial question, "What is it?" perhaps should never fully disappear. It should remain as a reminder of the mysterious and wondrous nature of God's provision. To lose that sense of wonder, you think, would be to lose something precious about the experience itself. It is good to be reminded that some gifts are beyond our full comprehension, their origins and mechanisms known only to God. This humility in the face of the divine is surely a part of the spiritual lesson embedded in the manna. Consider the precision of the provision. When the people gathered the manna, those who gathered much did not have too much, and those who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered just as much as they needed. This detail, recorded in Exodus, is truly remarkable. It speaks of a divine economy, a perfect calibration of supply and demand that transcends human effort or manipulation. It is another layer of the miracle, subtle yet profound. It fosters a sense of fairness and sufficiency within the community. There's no room for boasting about abundance or shame in perceived lack. When gathering according to God's design, it challenges the competitive spirit and encourages a communal mindset. How God's grace operates in such moments to ensure equity and sufficiency for all is a sacred mystery that continues to inspire awe and humble reflection. This daily balancing act, unseen yet perfectly executed, is a quiet testament to God's meticulous care. The days begin to settle into this new rhythm, waking at dawn, gathering the manna, preparing and eating it, and then going about the other tasks of desert life. The quail continue to come in the evenings, providing meat. This daily cycle of provision becomes the bedrock of your existence in the wilderness. It is a rhythm of grace, a rhythm of dependence, a rhythm of quiet miracles. You find yourself listening more intently to Moses' teachings, understanding more deeply the covenant relationship that God is forging with his people. In this desolate land, the desert, once a symbol of death and despair, is slowly being transformed into a classroom of faith, a sanctuary of divine presence. One of the most significant instructions regarding the manna concerns the Sabbath. Moses announces, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you wanted to bake and boil what you wanted to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning. On the 6th day, you are to gather a double portion of manna, enough for 2 days, because on the Sabbath, the 7th day, there will be no manna on the ground." This is a profound revelation. The Sabbath, a day of rest and holy observance, is to be honored even in the gathering of this miraculous food. It teaches you about God's sacred rhythms, about the importance of setting aside time for rest, for worship, for acknowledging Him as the ultimate source of all blessings. You watch with interest on that first 6th day. People go out and gather twice as much manna as usual, an omer for that day and an omer for the Sabbath. There's a sense of anticipation, perhaps even a little anxiety. Will the extra manna spoil, as it did when they tried to save it on other days? Will there truly be nothing on the Sabbath morning? This is another test of faith, another opportunity to trust God's word. You carefully store your extra portion, your heart prayerful, and then comes the Sabbath morning. You awaken, and a different kind of stillness pervades the camp. There is no bustling activity of gathering. People are resting, as commanded. You check the manna you saved from the previous day, and wonder of wonders, it is fresh. It has not spoiled. It has not bred worms. It is perfectly preserved, ready to be eaten. A wave of awe washes over you. God's provision extends even to the preservation of the Sabbath portion. It is a powerful confirmation of His faithfulness and His desire for His people to experience true rest in Him. You step outside your tent. The ground is bare. There is no manna. Those who, perhaps out of curiosity or doubt, went out to look for some, found nothing. Moses is firm with them. How long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day He gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out. His words are a reminder that obedience is intrinsically linked to blessing, that God's commands are not arbitrary, but designed for your good and for His glory. The Sabbath, you learn, is not just an absence of work. It is a positive embrace of rest, a sacred pause in the rhythm of life, a time to focus on God and His gifts. The manna, in its unique behavior around the Sabbath, becomes a powerful teacher of this holy principle. The experience of the Sabbath manna deepens your understanding of God's character. He is not a demanding taskmaster, but a loving Father who desires your well-being, both physical and spiritual. He provides for your needs, even your need for rest. The double portion on the 6th day is an act of sheer grace, ensuring that the Sabbath can be observed without anxiety about food. It is a beautiful illustration of how God's commands and His provision work together in perfect harmony. You reflect on how this weekly rhythm of work and rest, centered around God's provision, must have shaped the spiritual life of the Israelites, instilling in them a deep sense of God's order and care. As you partake of the preserved manna on the Sabbath, there is a special sweetness to it, a sense of sacredness. It is a meal eaten in an atmosphere of peace and tranquility, a foretaste, perhaps, of the ultimate rest that God promises His people. You spend the day in quiet reflection, in prayer, in fellowship with your family and community. The absence of the usual morning gathering creates a space for other kinds of activities, for spiritual nourishment, for remembering God's mighty deeds. This Sabbath rest, facilitated by the miracle of the manna, is a gift in itself, a sanctuary in time. The daily gathering of manna is also a lesson in humility. This heavenly bread cannot be cultivated. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be predicted by human wisdom. It simply appears each morning, a fresh gift from God. This dependence on a source outside of yourself, a source that is utterly reliable yet completely mysterious, cultivates a spirit of humility and gratitude. You cannot boast of your own efforts in producing this food. You can only receive it with open hands and a thankful heart. This daily act of receiving, you realize, is a powerful antidote to pride and self-sufficiency. It constantly reminds you of your creatureliness, of your utter reliance on the Creator for life and sustenance. You consider the subtle ways this daily miracle shapes your perception of the world. The desert, which once seemed so empty and lifeless, is now a place where God's glory is revealed each morning. The mundane rhythm of daily life, waking, eating, working, is infused with a sense of the sacred. Every sunrise brings with it a fresh encounter with divine grace. This changes how you see your surroundings, how you experience your days. There is a beauty in this simplicity, a profound spiritual depth in this quiet rhythm of gathering dessert bread at dawn. You also think about the challenges. While the manna is a miracle, a gift of God's love, you can imagine that eating the same food, day after day, month after month, might eventually become monotonous for some. The human heart is restless, often craving novelty and variety. Will this divine provision, so perfect in its way, eventually be met with discontent? This is a question that perhaps lingers in the back of your mind, a foreshadowing of future struggles. For now, however, the overwhelming emotions are gratitude, awe, and a growing sense of security in God's care. But the story of the manna is also a story of human nature, with all its complexities and contradictions, and the Bible, in its honesty, does not shy away from portraying these human frailties. The sun sets, casting long shadows across the desert. Another day of manna provision has ended. The camp settles into the quiet of the evening. You look up at the star-studded sky, feeling a deep sense of connection to the God who not only created this vast universe, but also cares enough to provide daily bread for His wandering people. The quiet rhythm of the Manna Mornings is etching itself into the soul of Israel, a foundational story of faith, dependence, and divine love. It's a rhythm that teaches trust, obedience, and the sanctity of rest. You are living this story. You are part of this miracle, and it is shaping you in ways you may not yet fully understand. But as you drift off to sleep, you know this: you are held, you are sustained, you are loved. And tomorrow morning, with the rising sun, the bread of heaven will appear again, a fresh token of God's unending faithfulness. The days turn into weeks, and the weeks into months. The landscape of the wilderness remains largely unchanged: vast stretches of sand, rugged mountains, sparse vegetation. But your inner landscape, and that of your community, is being subtly, yet profoundly, reshaped by the daily miracle of the manna. The initial shock and awe have perhaps softened, giving way to a more settled, though no less miraculous, reality. The manna is now an established part of your life, a constant in a world of uncertainty. Its appearance each morning, like the sunrise itself, is a dependable marker of God's fidelity. You reflect on the sheer logistical wonder of it, feeding a multitude, estimated to be over 2 million people, every single day, in the middle of a barren desert. For what would eventually be 40 years, the scale of this miracle is staggering. Humanly speaking, it is an impossibility. Yet here you are, living proof of its reality. This thought alone is enough to fill you with a sense of profound reverence for the God who makes the impossible possible. It challenges any lingering doubts about God's power or His commitment to His people. When human resources fail, when nature itself seems to offer no solution, God's creativity and power know no bounds. This is a lesson etched in every flake of manna that you gather. The specific instructions about gathering the omer per person, not hoarding. The Sabbath provision continue to be daily exercises in faith and obedience. You see how these rules are not arbitrary restrictions, but wise guidelines designed to foster a healthy spiritual life. The omer teaches sufficiency and contentment. The prohibition against hoarding cultivates trust and discourages anxiety. The Sabbath rule instills a rhythm of rest and worship. These are not just rules about food. They are principles for living a life centered on God. It makes you wonder about the rules or guidelines in your own spiritual journey. Are they perceived as burdens, or as pathways to deeper freedom and closer communion with the divine? You observe how the manna impacts family life. The daily gathering is a shared activity. Parents teach their children about this miraculous provision, passing on the stories of God's faithfulness. Mealtimes become opportunities for gratitude and fellowship. The manna, in its simplicity, draws families together, focusing them on the essentials of life and faith. It is a humble fare, yet it is imbued with sacred meaning. It nourishes not just the body, but the bonds of love and community. You also consider the communal aspect more broadly. The manna is for everyone, regardless of status or ability. The strong and the weak, the young and the old, all partake of the same heavenly bread. The shared experience fosters a sense of unity and interdependence. You are all in this wilderness journey together, equally dependent on God's grace. This must have a powerful effect on the social fabric of the community, breaking down barriers and fostering a spirit of mutual support. Theologians have often highlighted this communal dimension, seeing the manna as a symbol of God's universal love and provision, available to all who would receive it. The mystery of the manna itself continues to fascinate you. What is it? The question still echoes, even as you consume it daily. Its heavenly origin, its unique properties, its responsiveness to God's commands, like not spoiling on the Sabbath if kept as instructed. All these things point to its supernatural character. It is a constant reminder that God operates beyond the confines of the natural world, that He can intervene in extraordinary ways to accomplish His purposes. This sense of ongoing miracle, woven into the fabric of your daily life, keeps your faith alive and vibrant. It prevents complacency and fosters a continuous sense of wonder. You imagine the conversations around the campfires in the evenings. People would surely share their reflections on the manna, their experiences of God's faithfulness. Storytellers would recount the events of the Exodus, the parting of the Red Sea, and now, the daily provision of bread from heaven. These stories, passed down from generation to generation, would become the collective memory of the nation, shaping its identity and its understanding of its relationship with God. You are living in a time when these foundational stories are being forged, when God is revealing himself in powerful and intimate ways. The quiet rhythm of gathering the manna at dawn becomes a sacred ritual, a daily pilgrimage to the source of life. It is a time of quiet contemplation, of communion with nature and with God. The cool morning air, the soft light, the stillness of the desert all contribute to a sense of peace and reverence. In a world that is often noisy and chaotic, these manna mornings offer a sanctuary of stillness, an opportunity to reconnect with the divine presence that sustains you. You think about the importance of such rhythms in your own spiritual life, those daily or weekly practices that ground you in your faith and open your heart to God's grace. They are like anchors, holding you steady amidst the storms of life. The beauty of the manna rhythm is its simplicity, its accessibility to everyone, and its direct link to God's loving provision. The sun climbs high into the desert sky, its relentless heat beating down upon the sprawling camp of Israel. Weeks have now melted into months, and the rhythm of manna mornings has become an ingrained part of your existence. You rise before the sun fully crests the horizon, the cool air a fleeting bomb before the day's furnace is lit. You join the silent procession of figures moving through the pre-dawn gloom, baskets in hand, to gather the day's sustenance. The delicate, dew-kissed flakes of manna, God's bread from heaven, still appear faithfully. A shimmering carpet on the desert floor. There is a certain comfort in this predictability, a reassurance of God's unwavering care in this otherwise harsh and unforgiving landscape. You have learned the measure, the omer, perfectly. You know to gather only what you need for the day, for any excess will spoil. A poignant reminder of the call to daily trust. You meticulously observe the Sabbath commandment, gathering a double portion on the sixth day. And you marvel anew each Sabbath morning when the reserved manna remains fresh and wholesome, while the ground outside your tent lies bare. Yet, as time stretches on, a subtle shift begins to occur within the camp, a change in the atmosphere that you can almost taste, like the dust that settles on everything. The initial wonder, the profound gratitude that characterized those first manna mornings, has begun to fade for some, replaced by a duller, more accustomed acceptance. The miracle, repeated daily, risks becoming ordinary. You observe this with a measure of unease, recognizing a familiar human tendency to grow accustomed to even the most extraordinary blessings, to take for granted the very gifts that sustain life. The manna, once hailed with cries of "What is it?" is now simply the manna, the daily bread. And for some, perhaps, it is becoming only daily bread. You start to hear whispers of discontent, faint at first, like the rustle of dry leaves in a gentle breeze, but gradually growing in volume and intensity. The manna, this miraculous food, this gift from the very hand of God, is becoming a source of complaint. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, someone sighs, their voice tinged with a longing that conveniently forgets the bitter taste of slavery. That came with those fish. Also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. The words hang in the air, a stark contrast to the divine provision that surrounds you. You feel a pang of dismay. How quickly, you ponder, can the human heart forget past miseries and magnify present dissatisfactions? How easily can a monotonous blessing feel like a burden? The complaint is not just about the lack of variety, though that is the overt expression. It seems to run deeper, touching upon a restlessness, a yearning for something more, something different, something else. Perhaps it is the prolonged nature of this wilderness journey, the endless expanse of sand and rock, the feeling of being untethered, of not yet having reached the promised land of flowing milk and honey. The manna, in its unwavering sameness, becomes a symbol of this perceived stagnation, this endless waiting. You reflect on how challenging it is for the human spirit to sustain gratitude and contentment in the face of prolonged trial or monotony. It's a profound test of faith, not just to trust God for provision, but to remain thankful for the provision He chooses, in the way He chooses to give it, for as long as He chooses to give it. Moses, you observe, bears the brunt of this rising discontent. The people's grumbling, though ultimately directed at God, finds its immediate target in their visible leader. You see the weariness in his eyes, the the deep lines etched on his face by the constant burden of guiding this fickle and often rebellious people. He carries their complaints to God, his own heart heavy, his spirit perhaps close to breaking. The weight of leadership, you realize, is immense, especially when leading those who have grown weary of the journey and forgetful of the miracles. The book of Numbers vividly recounts this episode of intense complaining. The people weep, "If only we had meat to eat. Our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at." Their words are filled with self-pity and a dramatic exaggeration of their plight. Their strength is not dried up. The manna is sustaining them, keeping them alive and healthy in a barren wasteland. But their souls, it seems, are craving something more than sustenance. They crave the remembered flavors of Egypt, forgetting the price of those flavors. It's a poignant illustration of how memory can be selective, how the allure of past comforts, even those intertwined with suffering, can overshadow present blessings. You ponder the psychology of this discontent. Is it simply human nature to desire variety, or is there a deeper spiritual malaise at play? Perhaps the manna, in its purity and simplicity, is to direct a reminder of their dependence on God. Perhaps they long for a sense of control, for the ability to provide for themselves, to choose their own menu. The manna, for all its miraculous nature, offers no such illusion of control. It is a gift, pure and simple, demanding only reception and obedience. For some, this utter dependence might feel like a loss of agency, a humbling reality they are unwilling to fully embrace. Theologians through the ages have considered this tension, the human desire for autonomy versus the call to surrender to divine providence. The story of the manna highlights this struggle with raw honesty. God's response to this widespread grumbling is complex, revealing both his displeasure and his continued, albeit sometimes stern, compassion. He provides meat once again, an overwhelming abundance of quail, as he did before. But this time, the provision is accompanied by a severe plague, a consequence of their intense craving and ungrateful hearts. It is a sobering reminder that God is not a celestial vending machine, dispensing blessings on demand without regard for the attitude of the recipients. His gifts are intertwined with his desire for a right relationship with his people, a relationship characterized by trust, gratitude, and obedience. While interpretations may vary on the precise nature and reasons for the plague, the core message of accountability and the spiritual danger of unbridled, ungrateful desire shines through. This episode casts a shadow over the manna experience, not diminishing the miracle of the manna itself, but highlighting the human capacity to devalue even divine gifts. It serves as a cautionary tale, a mirror reflecting your own potential for discontent and ingratitude. How often, you wonder, have you overlooked or complained about blessings simply because they were familiar, or not exactly what you desired at that moment? How often have you longed for the leeks and onions of some past, perhaps idealized, situation, while ignoring the manna of God's present provision in your life? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are essential for spiritual growth. Yet, even amidst these episodes of failure and judgment, the manna continues to appear each morning. God does not withdraw his daily bread. His faithfulness endures, even in the face of human faithlessness. This, you realize, is one of the most profound aspects of the manna story. It is a testament to God's incredible patience, his long-suffering love, his unwavering commitment to his covenant people. He disciplines, yes. He allows consequences for sin, yes, but he does not abandon. The quiet rhythm of gathering dessert bread at dawn persists, a steady bass note of grace beneath the fluctuating melodies of human emotion and behavior. You reflect on the manna as a test. God himself stated that he would test them with it, to see if they would follow his instructions. The test is not just about obedience to the rules of gathering. It is also a test of character, a test of the heart. Will they learn gratitude? Will they cultivate contentment? Will they deepen their trust in God's wisdom and goodness, even when his provision is not to their immediate liking? The wilderness journey, with the manna at its core, is a school for the soul, designed to refine and purify God's people, to prepare them for the responsibilities and blessings of the promised land. The lessons are often hard-won, learned through failure and repentance as much as through joyful obedience. You consider the nature of spiritual sustenance, The manna, while physical food, clearly has profound spiritual implications. It teaches about dependence, trust, obedience, gratitude, and the rhythm of Sabbath rest. It points beyond itself to the giver, to the relationship he desires with his people. Later, Jesus himself would refer to the manna when he spoke of himself as the true bread from heaven, the bread that gives eternal life as recorded in the Gospel of John. This connection elevates the manna from a mere historical curiosity to a powerful theological symbol, a foreshadowing of God's ultimate provision for the deepest hunger of the human soul. Understanding the significance of the manna in this broader biblical narrative helps us grasp the full weight of God's patient, enduring provision, and the deeper hunger he alone can satisfy. You watch the daily routine of gathering. For many, despite the undercurrents of discontent that surface from time to time, the rhythm has become a source of stability, a quiet discipline. They rise, they gather, they prepare, they eat. There is a simplicity to it, a stripping away of non-essentials that can be profoundly grounding. In a life filled with so many uncertainties, the certainty of the manna is a lifeline. It is a daily reminder that, no matter what challenges the day may bring, God's provision will be there. This quiet assurance, you realize, can be a powerful antidote to anxiety and fear. You think about the visual of the manna itself: small, round, like coriander seed, white. There is an unassuming quality to it. It is not a spectacular, fiery display of God's power like the parting of the Red Sea. It is a quiet miracle, a gentle miracle, woven into the fabric of everyday life. Perhaps this is why it is so easily taken for granted. We often look for God in the dramatic, in the extraordinary, and miss his presence in the ordinary, in the gentle rhythms of grace that sustain us day by day. The manna is an invitation to cultivate eyes that see God's hand in the small, everyday provisions, in the quiet blessings that are often overlooked. The desert sun beats down, and the heat shimmers above the sand. The camp is relatively quiet during the hottest part of the day. People seek shelter in their tents, conserving their energy. You have eaten your portion of manna, and you feel its sustaining power. It is not a rich feast, perhaps not the varied diet you once knew in Egypt, or the one you dream of in Canaan, but it is enough. It is what God has provided, and in that provision, there is a profound lesson in contentment if you are willing to learn it. How God's grace operates in such moments to teach contentment through sustained, simple provision is a sacred mystery that continues to inspire awe and humble reflection. You observe the elders, those who strive to maintain faith and encourage the people. They remind the community of God's past deliverances, of his promises for the future. They speak of the manna not as a sign of deprivation, but as a mark of God's special favor, his intimate care for his chosen people. Their words are like water on parched ground, helping to counteract the voices of discontent. You realize the importance of such voices of faith within any community, those who help to reframe challenges, to point towards hope, and to call people back to gratitude. The rules about the manna gathering only in Omer, not hoarding. The Sabbath provision are not just about the food itself, but about cultivating a certain kind of community, a community that trusts in God's daily provision rather than human accumulation, a community that honors sacred time and rests in God's care, a community where there is sufficiency for all, without excess or lack. This ideal, you reflect, is a powerful vision for human society, a vision rooted in justice, equity, and shared dependence on the divine. The manna economy is a divine critique of economies built on greed, exploitation, and anxiety. As the day draws to a close, and the cool of the evening begins to settle over the desert, you look out at the sprawling camp. The fires are being lit, and families are gathering for their evening meal, which might include the quail that God sometimes sends, or simply the prepared manna. There's a resilience in these people, a capacity to endure, to hope. Even in the midst of hardship and their own failings, the manna is part of that story of endurance. It is the fuel that keeps them going, day after weary day. On this long journey towards an unseen promise, you think about the 40 years that Israel will spend in the wilderness, sustained by this heavenly bread. 40 years. It is an almost unimaginable length of time to live in such a way. 40 years of daily dependence, 40 years of this simple diet, 40 years of learning the lessons of the desert. The manna is not just a temporary fix. It is a long-term strategy of divine sustenance and spiritual formation. It speaks of God's incredible patience and His commitment to shaping a people who will truly be His own. This prolonged period of manna provision underscores its significance not merely as food, but as a divine pedagogy, a teaching tool of immense power and duration. You feel a sense of awe at this divine patience. How many times will the people grumble? How many times will they doubt? How many times will they disobey? And yet, each morning, the manna will appear. This unwavering faithfulness of God, in the face of human inconsistency, is perhaps the most profound miracle of all. It is a love that does not give up, a grace that persists, a mercy that renews itself morning by morning, just like the manna. The quiet rhythm of gathering dessert bread at dawn becomes a daily encounter with this steadfast love of God, a love that sustains, disciplines, and ultimately redeems. And as you prepare for another night's rest, you hold on to this truth, a beacon of hope in the vast and silent wilderness. The desert night sky unfolds above you, a breathtaking tapestry of stars glittering like countless diamonds scattered across black velvet. You sit in the quiet stillness outside your tent, the embers of the communal fires glowing softly in the darkness. The day's heat has given way to a refreshing coolness, and a gentle breeze whispers through the camp, carrying the faint, earthy scent of the wilderness. Your mind is filled with reflections on the manna, this mysterious bread from heaven that has become the very pulse of your daily life. It is more than just food, you realize with ever-increasing clarity. It is a sacrament, a visible sign of an invisible grace, a profound symbol laden with spiritual meaning that continues to unfold, layer by layer, as your journey through this desert continues. You ponder the very nature of the manna, described in the scriptures as being like coriander seed, white, and tasting like wafers made with honey, or like fresh oil. Its characteristics are both simple and evocative. Its smallness and roundness might speak of humility, of God's provision coming in unassuming forms. Its whiteness could symbolize purity, a holy sustenance untainted by earthly corruption. Its sweet taste, a gentle reminder of God's goodness and kindness, even in the midst of trial. These sensory details, recorded for posterity, invite generations to imagine and meditate upon the intimate care of God for His people. You wonder if the Israelites themselves, in their daily interaction with it, paused to consider these symbolic dimensions, or if such reflections came later. With the benefit of hindsight and deeper spiritual understanding, perhaps it was a mixture of both. Moments of intuitive insight punctuating the routine of daily gathering. One of the most profound spiritual lessons embedded in the manna experience is its connection to the Word of God. You recall the words that Moses would later speak, and which Jesus Himself would quote during His temptation in the wilderness. Man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Deuteronomy 8:3. The manna, in its daily, reliable provision, mirrors the way God's Word sustains the spiritual life. Just as you need the manna each day for physical survival, so too, you realize, you need daily nourishment from God's truth, His guidance, His promises, to sustain your soul. The manna was a test of obedience to God's instructions, and these instructions were His words. The very act of gathering and consuming the manna according to God's command was an act of living by His Word. This insight deepens your appreciation for the manna. It is not just about filling empty stomachs, but about cultivating hearts that listen to and obey God. You think again about the Sabbath and how the manna miracle uniquely underscored its sanctity. The double portion on the sixth day, the absence of manna on the seventh, and the preservation of the Sabbath portion. These were weekly reminders of God's ordained rhythm of work and rest. The Sabbath, you reflect, is more than just a cessation of labor. It is a declaration of trust. By resting on the Sabbath, you declare that God is your ultimate provider, that your well-being does not depend solely on your own efforts. The manna for the Sabbath, provided in advance, was a tangible expression of God's enabling grace for this act of trust. It's a profound lesson in divine sovereignty and human reliance, a lesson that resonates deeply in a world that often idolizes constant activity and relentless productivity. The Sabbath manna teaches a different way, a way of holy rest, of joyful celebration of God's goodness, of deliberate time set aside for communion with Him and with community. How God's grace operates in such moments, providing for rest and worship, is a sacred mystery that continues to inspire awe and humble reflection. A particularly poignant detail from the story of the manna is the instruction given to Moses. To preserve a pot of it, Aaron was to take an omer of manna and place it in a golden jar, to be kept before the testimony, within the Ark of the Covenant, as a reminder for generations to come. Exodus 16:33-34. Hebrews 9-4. You imagine this scene, a simple, humble food, the daily bread of a wandering people, being enshrined in the most sacred place, alongside the tablets of the law. What an extraordinary honor for such an unassuming substance. This act of preservation speaks volumes about the significance of the manna. It was to be a perpetual memorial, a tangible witness to God's miraculous provision and faithfulness during those 40 years in the wilderness. Future generations, who would not experience the manna firsthand, could see this preserved sample and remember the God who sustained their ancestors in the desert. It was a call to remember, to never forget the lessons learned in the crucible of the wilderness. You reflect on the power of memorials, of physical reminders of God's faithfulness. In your own life, are there pots of manna experiences, symbols, stories that you need to preserve, to cherish, to revisit regularly, so that you do not forget God's past mercies and provisions? It is so easy for memory to fade, for gratitude to wane. The preserved manna serves as a divine strategy against spiritual amnesia. It's a call to build altars of remembrance in our hearts and in our communities. Theologians through the ages have marveled at the layers of meaning in this divine command. To preserve the manna, seeing it as an affirmation of the importance of historical memory and faith, and as a foreshadowing of Christ, the true bread from heaven, whose presence is perpetually remembered in the sacrament of communion by many believers. The manna also served as a powerful teacher about God's justice and equity. The one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Exodus 16:18. This miraculous balancing act, day after day, for millions of people, is a profound statement about God's ideal for community. In God's economy, there is sufficiency for all. Hoarding is unnecessary and even counterproductive as it led to spoilage. This principle stands in stark contrast to the world's systems, which often lead to vast disparities between rich and poor, abundance for some and scarcity for others. The manna economy is a model of divine justice, where everyone's needs are met, and everyone has enough. It challenges you to think about how this principle might apply to your own communities, to your own attitudes towards wealth, resources, and sharing with those in need. You ponder the challenges the manna presented, not just the monotony, but the very fact of its miraculous nature. Living in constant, undeniable dependence on a daily miracle can be unsettling. It removes the illusion of self-sufficiency. It forces you to confront your vulnerability, your need for a power beyond yourself. For some, this might have been a source of anxiety, a feeling of being out of control. Yet, for those who embraced it, this dependence could also be a source of profound freedom from the burden of self-reliance, freedom from the anxiety of providing for oneself, freedom to simply receive and trust. The manna experience, in this sense, was a deep spiritual exercise in surrender. Consider the wilderness itself as the backdrop for this miracle. The desert is a place of stripping away, of removing distractions, of forcing reliance on the essentials. It is in this place of emptiness and vulnerability that God chose to reveal Himself so intimately as provider. Perhaps it is only when we are emptied of our own resources, our own illusions of strength, that we can truly appreciate the fullness of God's grace. The manna in the desert is a testament to this truth. It reminds you that God often meets us in our places of greatest need, in our personal wildernesses, and provides for us in ways we could never imagine. The harshness of the desert environment amplified the sweetness of the divine provision. The story of the manna is also a story about God's patience. 40 years the Israelites ate manna. 40 years God sustained them with this heavenly bread, despite their frequent grumbling, their lapses in faith, their outright rebellion. This enduring faithfulness of God is almost incomprehensible. It speaks of a love that is unconditional, a mercy that is relentless. The daily appearance of the manna was a daily renewal of God's covenant promise, a daily whisper of His steadfast love. How many times did the sun rise on a camp that was undeserving, yet found itself covered in the dew of God's provision? This thought fills you with a profound sense of humility and awe. It is a picture of God's grace, which is not dependent on our merit, but flows freely from His own loving nature. You also reflect on the manna as a foreshadowing of something greater. As mentioned, Jesus Himself identified with the manna, declaring, "I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven." John 6:48-51. This statement from Jesus casts the manna story in a new, even more profound light. The manna sustained physical life in the desert, but it pointed towards a deeper, spiritual hunger that only Christ, the true bread from heaven, can satisfy. The manna was a temporary provision for a temporary journey. Christ offers eternal life, an everlasting sustenance for the soul. This connection does not diminish the miracle of the manna in the wilderness. Rather, it fulfills it, revealing its ultimate purpose in God's redemptive plan. While interpretations may vary on the full extent of the typological connections, the core message of God's progressive revelation and His ultimate provision in Christ shines through. The manna, then, is not just a historical event, but a rich theological symbol, pregnant with meaning. It speaks of God's providence, His faithfulness, His justice, His patience, His holiness, especially in relation to the Sabbath, and His ultimate plan of salvation. It teaches about human dependence, obedience, gratitude, contentment, and the dangers of grumbling and unbelief. It is a story that continues to nourish the faith of believers, inviting them to trust in God's provision, to live by His word, and to seek the true bread that gives eternal life. As you sit there, under the vast desert sky, these reflections deepen your understanding of the Manna Mornings. They are not just about a quiet rhythm of gathering dessert bread at dawn. They are about a profound encounter with the living God, an encounter that shapes, transforms, and sustains His people on their journey towards the promise. The silence of the night seems to amplify these thoughts, allowing them to sink deep into your soul. You feel a renewed sense of gratitude for this miraculous provision, and for the timeless spiritual truths it conveys. The manna is a gift for all time, a story that continues to speak to the deepest needs and longings of the human heart. The stars above seem to bear silent witness to this enduring truth, their distant light a reminder of the eternal God who watches over His children, then and now, with an unwavering, providing love. You consider the collective memory of Israel. The manna story would be read countless times, sung about in Psalms, like Psalm 78 and Psalm 105, which recount God's mighty deeds on behalf of Israel, including the provision of manna, and referred to by prophets. It would become a cornerstone of their identity as God's chosen and sustained people. He rained down manna for the people to eat. He gave them the bread of heaven. Human beings ate the bread of angels. He sent them all the food they could eat. Psalm 78-24-25. These poetic retellings capture the awe and gratitude associated with this miraculous feeding. The phrase bread of angels elevates the manna beyond mere earthly food, hinting at its divine origin and supernatural quality. It was a taste of heaven in the midst of the wilderness. The preservation of the manna in the ark was a constant, silent sermon. Every time the priests ministered before the ark, every time the ark was mentioned or revered, the memory of that golden pot of manna would be implicitly present. It served as a reminder that the God of the covenant, the God of the law, was also the God of daily provision, the God who walked with His people through the barren places and sustained them with His own hand. This juxtaposition of law and grace, of covenant obligation and divine sustenance, is a powerful theological statement. You also think about the temporary nature of the manna. It was given for a specific time. For the duration of the wilderness wanderings, it was not meant to be a permanent diet. This, too, holds a spiritual lesson. God's provisions are often tailored to specific seasons of our lives, to specific needs and challenges. What sustains us in one season may not be what we need in another. The manna taught the Israelites to depend on God for what they needed then, in the wilderness. It also, by its eventual cessation, taught them to look forward to a different kind of provision in the promised land, the fruit of the land, which they would cultivate and harvest themselves, yet still recognizing it as God's gift. This transition itself would be another lesson in God's multifaceted ways of providing for His people. The manna was a profoundly humbling provision. It could not be earned. It could not be stored up except for the Sabbath. It could not be controlled. It simply appeared, day by day, a pure gift. This daily reception of unmerited grace is at the heart of a genuine faith relationship with God. It strips away pride and self-reliance and fosters a spirit of gratitude and dependence. In a world that often emphasizes achievement and self-made success, the manna offers a counter-narrative. True life, true sustenance, comes from God alone. As a gift to be received with open hands, you reflect on the very name, Manna Mornings, the quiet rhythm of gathering dessert bread at dawn. The quiet rhythm speaks of a gentleness, a consistency, a peacefulness that underlies this miraculous provision. Even when the people were grumbling, even when they were disobedient, the manna appeared quietly, faithfully, with the morning dew. This quiet persistence of God's grace is a profound comfort. It suggests that God's love is not easily deterred. His purpose is not easily thwarted by human weakness. He continues to offer His gifts, His sustenance, His presence, even when we are slow to appreciate them or quick to complain. This quiet rhythm is the heartbeat of God's enduring mercy. As the first hints of dawn begin to touch the eastern horizon, painting the sky with soft hues of lavender and rose, you feel a deep sense of peace. The night of reflection has enriched your understanding of this extraordinary gift. The manna is not just a solution to hunger. It is a divine revelation, a spiritual education, a symbol of God's enduring love and faithfulness. It is a story that continues to resonate, inviting you and all who hear it to find their own manna moments, their own experiences of God's quiet, daily provision, and to live in a rhythm of gratitude, trust, and obedience. The dessert, once a place of dread, has become a sanctuary of encounter, a classroom of divine wisdom, all thanks to the gentle miracle of the manna. The 40 years of wandering in the wilderness are drawing to a close. You stand now, in spirit, with the children of Israel on the plains of Moab, on the very edge of the promised land. The air is thick with anticipation, with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Across the Jordan River, you can almost glimpse the verdant hills of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and honey, the land promised to your ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It has been a long, arduous journey, a journey marked by miracles and rebellions, by divine guidance and human frailty. And through it all, for decades, one constant has remained, the daily provision of manna, God's bread from heaven. Each morning, without fail, it has appeared with the dew, a quiet, faithful reminder of God's sustaining presence. You reflect on the generations that have lived and died in the wilderness, sustained by this miraculous food. An entire generation that came out of Egypt, save for Caleb and Joshua, perished in the desert due to their unbelief and disobedience. Their children, however, grew up on manna. For them, it was the only bread they had ever known. What a unique upbringing, to be nourished daily by a direct, supernatural gift from God. This manna generation is now poised to enter the land, carrying with them the lessons, both learned and unlearned, from their parents' experiences and their own unique pilgrimage. The manna has shaped them, not just physically, but spiritually and culturally. It has taught them dependence, the importance of God's commands, and the sanctity of the Sabbath. Or, at least, it was intended to. The true test of these lessons will come as they transition to a new way of life in Canaan. The book of Joshua records the momentous occasion when the manna ceased. After the Israelites crossed the Jordan River into Canaan, they celebrated the Passover in Gilgal. And the day after the Passover, on the 14th day of the month, they ate of the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. And then, the scripture says, the manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites. But that year they ate the produce of Canaan. Joshua 5:11-12. You try to imagine that morning. The people would have risen, as they had done for 40 years, expecting to see the familiar white flakes covering the ground. But this time, The ground would be bare. The manna, their constant companion, their daily sustenance, would be gone. What a profound moment that must have been. A mixture of emotions would surely have swept through the camp. Perhaps a tinge of sadness, the end of an era, the passing of a familiar, albeit sometimes monotonous, miracle. Perhaps a little anxiety. Will the land truly provide enough? Will we know how to cultivate it? To live off its produce after so long being directly fed by God? But also, undoubtedly, a surge of excitement and gratitude. The cessation of manna was not a punishment, but a sign that God's promise was being fulfilled. They were no longer wanderers in a barren desert. They were inhabitants of a fruitful land. The need for supernatural, daily provision of manna was over, because God was now providing for them in a new way, through the natural abundance of the land He had given them. This transition itself is a powerful lesson. God's methods of provision may change, but His faithfulness remains constant. He provides what is needed for each season of life. You reflect on the symbolism of this transition. The manna was wilderness food, food for a journey, food for a time of testing and formation. The produce of Canaan was settled land food, food for a time of inheritance and responsibility. The cessation of manna marked a significant shift in their relationship with God and with the created order. They would now partner with God in a different way, tilling the soil, planting seeds, and harvesting crops. Yet, even in this new context, they were to remember that all good gifts come from God. The fertility of the land, the rains that watered the crops, the sun that ripened the grain, all were expressions of His ongoing providence. The memory of the manna was to serve as a perpetual reminder that, whether provision comes supernaturally or through natural means, God is always the ultimate source. The pot of manna, preserved in the Ark of the Covenant, would continue to be a silent witness to this truth for generations. It would remind them of their humble origins, of their utter dependence on God during those formative years in the desert. It would stand as a warning against pride and self-sufficiency, lest they forget the God who had sustained them when they had nothing. This enduring memorial, as you reflected upon earlier, highlights God's desire for His people to maintain a living memory of His faithfulness, a memory that informs their present and shapes their future. The legacy of the manna extends far beyond its physical sustenance. It became a rich symbol in Israel's theological reflection and in later Christian thought. As we touched upon, the prophets and psalmists recalled the manna as a prime example of God's loving care for His people, and most significantly, Jesus Christ, in the Gospel of John, used the manna to explain His own identity and mission. When the crowds, after the feeding of the 5,000, asked for a sign like the manna, Jesus declared, "Very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world." John 6:32-33. And then He made that profound, life-altering statement, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." John 6:35. You let these words sink deep into your heart. The manna, that quiet dessert bread, was a foreshadowing, a type, of Jesus Himself. Just as the manna sustained physical life in the wilderness, Jesus, the living bread, offers eternal life, spiritual sustenance for the deepest hunger of the human soul. The manna had to be gathered daily. Relationship with Christ requires daily communion, daily nourishment from His Word and His presence. The manna was a gift from God. Salvation through Christ is a gift of God's grace, received by faith. The manna eventually ceased. Christ's provision is eternal, His life unending. This connection elevates the story of the Manna Mornings to an even more profound level of significance. It becomes part of the grand, unfolding narrative of God's redemption, pointing ultimately to Jesus as the perfect and complete provision for all humanity. Theologians through the ages have marveled at the layers of meaning in this divine topology, seeing in the manna a beautiful prefigurement of the Eucharist, or Holy Communion for many Christians, where believers partake of bread and wine in remembrance of Christ's sacrifice and in celebration of His life-giving presence. So, as you contemplate the end of the manna, you realize it is not truly an end, but a transition, a fulfillment. The lessons learned from those quiet mornings of gathering dessert bread were meant to endure. The call to daily dependence on God, the importance of gratitude and obedience, the sanctity of Sabbath rest, the experience of God's unwavering faithfulness, these are timeless truths, as relevant today as they were for the Israelites in the wilderness. The manna may have disappeared from the desert floor, but its spiritual nourishment continues to feed the souls of those who reflect on its story. You imagine the Israelites, now settling in Canaan, sometimes looking back on those wilderness years, perhaps with mixed emotions, remembering the hardships, the grumbling, the failures, but also, hopefully, with a sense of awe and gratitude for the God who led them, disciplined them, and sustained them with bread from heaven. They would tell their children and their children's children the story of the manna, ensuring that this miraculous provision was never forgotten. It would become a part of their sacred heritage, a testament to the God who is faithful in all circumstances, in all seasons. As you prepare to gently conclude this extended meditation on the Manna Mornings, you reflect on its enduring message for your own life. Are you in a wilderness season, a time of uncertainty, of scarcity, of feeling untethered? Remember the manna. Remember that God sees your need. He hears your cries, even your grumbling ones. Though He desires your trust, and He is able to provide for you in ways you cannot imagine, His provision may not always look like what you expect or what you think you want. It may be simple, unassuming, like the manna. It may require daily effort, daily trust, daily obedience, but it will be sufficient. It will sustain you, and it will teach you profound lessons about His character and His love. Perhaps you are in a season of abundance, a promised land season. Remember the manna then, too. Remember that all good things come from God. Do not grow complacent or self-sufficient. Do not forget the lessons of dependence and gratitude learned in leaner times. Preserve your own pot of manna, those memories of God's past faithfulness, and let them inform your present and guide your future. And always, always seek the true bread from heaven, Jesus Christ, who alone can satisfy the deepest hunger of your soul. The quiet rhythm of gathering dessert bread at dawn was more than just a survival strategy for the Israelites. It was a divine pedagogy, a school of faith, a daily encounter with the living God. It was a story of grace, whispered on the desert wind, a story of sustenance found in the most unlikely of places. It reminds us that God's love is practical, His care is personal, His provision is perfect. Even in our own deserts, He can make a way. He can rain down bread from heaven. He can turn barrenness into blessing. Let the peace of this ancient story settle over you now. Feel the quiet rhythm of God's grace in your own life. Open your heart to receive His daily provision, His spiritual nourishment. Trust in His unwavering faithfulness. And may you, like the Israelites who finally entered the promised land, carry the lessons of the manna with you, living each day in grateful dependence on the God who sustains, guides, and loves you beyond measure. The Manna Mornings may have ended for Israel, but the God of the manna is an everlasting God, whose mercies are new every morning. Great is His faithfulness. Allow this profound truth to be the gentle lullaby that ushers you into a peaceful, restorative sleep, trusting that as a new day dawns, His provision, in whatever form it takes, will be there to meet you. The quiet rhythm of His grace continues, an eternal melody of love.